Football is a simple game. All you have to do is score more goals than your opponents and you walk away victorious. Easy, right? Well, no, not exactly. Over the years, there have been various different approaches when it comes to management and tactical styles that are designed to outthink your opponents. Everyone is always looking out for that perfect setup to utilise their squad and impose their football philosophy. Well, Football Manager is no different. There is a tactical style and footballing philosophy for every kind of manager. Some people like to refine their tactics like a fine work of art, and others prefer the simplicity of a plug and play tactic that you can download and use to have success in the FM world with minimal fuss. In today's video, I'm going to break down a plug and play tactic that you can download from the description below that can help you lead your team to glory in FM24. The subject of today's tactic video is the Copa 4-1-1-4. Now, it may look a little bit strange. It may set up as a 4-2-4 if you want to look at it slightly different. This is what we have gone with. It's a 4-1-1-4. As always, I'm going to break this tactic down. I'm going to run you through the three main sections: the in possession, the in transition, and the out of possession. Then I will break down all of the player roles and the instructions. Let's kick things off then by moving to the top left hand corner. As always, these tactics come with a custom tactical play style. It has a positive mentality. The in possession tab will look like this. The in transition will look like this. And the out of possession will look like this. So those are the three main important groups of instructions. But let's break down all of the players and their roles and instructions. Starting off at the back, you'll have a sweeper keeper set to defend. On the left, you have a fullback set to support. You then have two ball-playing defenders, both set to defend. And on the right-hand side, you have an inverted wing-back set to support. Moving into midfield, you have a segundo volante set to support. You then have a mezzala set to attack. On the left, you have an inside forward set to support. And on the right, you have one set to attack. At the top end of the pitch, you have a pressing forward set to support. And you have an advanced forward set to attack. So that is the tactic. Those are the instructions. The tactic is set up to be structurally sound at the back with the 4-man defence. You then have a gap in the midfielders so one can hold and help the defence, becoming a 5-man defence. And you have one that is split going forward so he can join the attack to have 5 players in the attacking areas. Fingers crossed, it should work out where it becomes balanced. There are going to be gaps in the middle of the pitch and you may concede possession quite a lot. Bear with it because this tactic will work because those two midfielders will balance each other out. For this video, I've put it in the hands of Wigan, Porto and AC Milan. That is to give you an idea of what it can do with 3 very different teams who play different styles of football. Right then, let's have a look at how this tactic has performed. To kick the results roundup off, we are starting in League 1 in England, where we tested the 4-1-1-4 with Wigan, and we can see that they would go on to win League 1, gaining promotion to the Championship as champions. They would go on to have a record of 46 games played, 39 wins, 4 draws, 3 losses. They would score 163 goals across 46 games. They would concede 40, have a goal difference of 123, finishing on 121 points. And that means they would easily win the league by 26 points from Luton. In fact, they may as well have already been in the Championship. They are so far ahead of League 1. So we know that the tactic has performed fantastically in League 1. How did it get on in the other competitions that Wigan would play in? So the answer seems to be a little bit disappointing. They would get through to the FA Cup second round where they would get knocked out by Woking. Bit disappointing. In the Carabao Cup, they'd be knocked out in the 4th round by Crystal Palace. And in the English Football League Trophy, they would actually get knocked out by Luton, who they just obliterated in the league, where they would reach the quarter-finals. So we know that he has won the league at a canter, not so good in one-off knockout games. But what happened in terms of the numbers? Let's look at the data hub, where you can see that they would score an average of 3.54 goals per game. They would concede 0.87 per game, have 18.4 shots per game, and they would have a pass completion of 87.14%. Let's look at the squad then to see the assists, the goals, and where they came from. And the first thing you're going to notice is Paul Mullin was the top goal scorer for Wigan with 47 goals from 51 appearances. Now, Paul Mullin has just joined Wigan from Wrexham, and he's already in my save game. Now, how did I do that? If you want to find out the answer to that, there will be a link in the description down below where you can find a link to a video where it will show you how to get some save game files. There will be 9 nations across multiple leagues. They should have up-to-date data for all of the leagues that are available in those saves and up-to-date transfers. If you want that, don't forget to go to the description after this video. Right then, let's get back into these numbers. So Paul Mullin, goal scoring machine in League One, 47 goals from 51 games. You would then have Hudson Holloway chipping in with 29 goals, Matthew Smith with 22, Dion Rankin 16, you'd have Hungbo with 16, and further down Christian Sadie with 13. In terms of the assists, it would be Matthew Smith from a defensive midfield position. He would get 33 assists and 22 goals in 51 games. Absolute mental numbers for a defensive midfielder. Also chipping in, Paul Mullin would get 17 assists. You would have 8 for Hudson Holloway. You'd have 12 for Dion Rankin. You'd have Hungbo getting 14 further down. You'd have Luke Robinson getting 15 assists. So we can see the goals have mainly come from the forwards. You've got Paul Mullin with the majority of those. The assists, though, are coming from the midfielders. That split midfield really does work because you can see that the midfielders will join the attack. They'll protect the back four. And they will create chances. The second team that I tested this tactic with was Porto over in Portugal. And we can see that once again, the 4-1-1-4 has won another league. This time, it's the Liga Portugal Betclic. Porto would go on to win the league with a record of 34 games played, 30 wins, 2 draws, 2 losses. They would score 135 goals. They would concede 29. That would give them a goal difference of 106. They would finish on 92 points, meaning that they would win the league from Sporting by 5 points. And they would be 6 points clear of Benfica. So once again, we know that in terms of the league, the tactic has performed really, really well. How though did it get on in those domestic competitions and the other ones that they played in? So starting off in the Europa League, they would make it through to the quarterfinals. They would come up against Newcastle, where they would get knocked out. But the domestic cups, wow, we can tick both of those. They would go on to play in the Taça de Portugal placard final, where they would come up against Atletico CP, and they would win that 3-1. And in the Allianz Cup, they would end up the winners of that, beating Braga in the final 2-0. So we have a domestic treble for Porto. They did get knocked out in the Europa League quarterfinals, but we can see that in terms of the domestic competitions, Porto have had a fantastic season. In the data hub, let's look at some of the numbers across the season. They would average a fantastic 3.97 goals per game. They would concede just 0.85, have 21.4 shots per game. They would have a pass completion ratio of 88.6%. Let's look at the squad then to see the goals, the assists, and where they came from. So, as mentioned before, we are playing an up-to-date database. Luke de Jong was revealed as a Porto player the other day, completely out the blue, no media hype around it, just walked onto the pitch in a kit, and in his first season he will score 43 goals in 38 appearances according to Football Manager. Might be a little bit out there, but in terms of this tactic, being at the top of the pitch, he really did settle into that role of just sweeping up everything. He would score long range goals, he would score short range goals, he would score all of the goals. But Samu Omarodian would also score goals. He would get 38 goals from 42 appearances. Further down, you got Alan Varela. He would get 17. You would have Eustachio with 16. Pepe 15. Namaso would get 14. And Ivan Hamey would get 10. In terms of the assists, once again, it's Eustachio from a defensive midfield position. He would get 20 assists. Also Pepe from the left-hand side of the pitch, whether that be from a deeper wing-back role or further up the pitch, he would get 15 goals and 20 assists. Further down, you would get Cardoso, once again, able to play as a defensive midfielder. He would get 15 assists. So the assists are really coming from that midfield area. The goals obviously scored by the strikers, but they are all chipping in. That right there is a mad partnership of goals between Luke de Jong and Samu Amarodian. And to wrap the results roundup off, we are in Italy looking at Serie A. Once again, we find the 4-1-1-4 has won another league, as Milan would go on to win Serie A. They would do it by playing 38 games, winning 34, drawing twice, losing twice. They would score 142 goals, conceding 30, giving them a 112 goal difference. They would finish on 104 points. They would win the league at an absolute canter. Inter Milan would finish 13 points behind. So we have seen the 4-1-1-4 now claim 3 league titles. But how did it get on in the other competitions that Milan would play in? So the answer to that is they would win the UEFA Europa Conference League. They would get all the way to the final, where they would be drawn against Crystal Palace of all teams. And unfortunately for Palace, Milan were way too strong. They would win 6-0 in the final. The other competition they played in was the Copa Italia. They once again would get to the final. Unfortunately for Milan, they would lose 2-0 in that final. So we have a league winning tactic in Serie A. We also have the UEFA Europa Conference League sewn up for Milan. Let's look in the data hub then to see the numbers behind the season. They would score 3.74 goals per game, concede 0.79, have on average 20 shots per game and an 88% pass completion ratio. Looking at the squad then for the goals and the assists and where they came from. So it would be Lorenzo Colombo, who would get 47 goals from 49 games. That came as a bit of a shock to me. I didn't realise he was actually that good. But it turns out he had a fantastic season, scoring 47 goals. Santiago Jimenez would score 22 goals. Loftus-Cheek chipping in with 21. Okafor scoring 20. Pulisic 17. And Rafael Leao 17 goals. In terms of the assists, once again, it is Benacer from the middle of the park. Defensive midfielder, 23 assists. You'd also have Loftus-Cheek chipping in. Another defensive midfielder. Can play as a defensive midfielder. 19 assists there. Christian Pulisic would get 19 assists. Further down, Estupinan, new boy, 13 assists from that left-hand side of the pitch. So we really see a clear pattern. It's goals scored by your central player. It is assists coming from your defensive midfielders and from the wide players. We have seen just in this video, Wigan have won League One. They have been promoted to the Championship. We would have Porto win a domestic treble, and Milan would go on to win Serie A, and they would win the UEFA Europa Conference League.